Seemingly out of nowhere, the Yakuza games have exploded in popularity recently, and it's well deserved. They are a unique blend of over-the-top action, beat-em-up brawler combat, and are filled with intelligently written characters. It's a series I've grown to love and can absolutely recommend it if you're looking for something new or different to try out. But with 8 mainline games and tons of spin-offs, you might be wondering where to start. Do you need to play all the games, or should you start with the newest one, or perhaps even at the beginning? Don't worry, if you've just heard about the series recently, or maybe played Like a Dragon and are wondering where to go next, I have you all covered as I go over which Yakuza game you should play first. As always, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. I do gaming discussions and reviews, and I'll also be doing more Yakuza content in the future as well. While Yakuza's popularity seems like it came out of nowhere, it's actually been building up for a few years now in the West, especially after the release of Yakuza Zero and the recent Yakuza Like a Dragon. I started with Like a Dragon and fell in love with the series, so I decided to go back and play all of the mainline games and even some of the spin-offs. But you might be wondering, why is it so complicated of a question as to which game to play first? Well, the problem is that we now have the original games, remakes, remasters, prequels, and even a new protagonist with an entirely new cast of characters in the latest game, making which game to play more complicated than it seems. As I see it, there's 5 potential starting points. However, I believe 2 of them will really be the best places to start for most people, depending on if you've played any games in the series yet or not. Before we go over these starting points and which ones are the best, we need to take a look back and go over Yakuza's mainline game release history to get a better picture. Other than the most recent game, all of the Yakuza games were released earlier in Japan than the West, sometimes by a few years. The Yakuza series has always been more popular in Japan, so for the purposes of this video we'll be focusing on the Western releases. The first Yakuza game was released on the PS2 back in 2006, and its follow-up was then released on the PS2 in 2008. Pretty standard affair so far, right? Well, here's where things start to get complicated. Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 were all PS3 releases, however, Yakuza 3 saw heavy censorship along with some content being removed in the West because the developers felt some of the story beats would not go over well with that audience. Yakuza Zero was the first PS4 release, however, it was a cross-gen title in Japan, although it only released on PS4 in the West. The same went for the follow-up Yakuza Kiwami, which was a remake of the original Yakuza game on the PS2, with new story elements added in to help flesh out the main villain. It used the framework of Yakuza Zero, so it was a huge upgrade compared to the original game. Next we saw the final game starring original protagonist Kiro, Yakuza 6 The Song of Life, which was the first PS4 exclusive game in the series. This was also the first game to move to the stunningly gorgeous looking Dragon engine that all future games would be developed on. After Yakuza 6, Ryuga Gotoku Studio remade Yakuza 2, calling it Yakuza Kiwami 2, which used the framework and new engine of Yakuza 6, along with a ton of extra minigames and side plotlines added in. After Kiwami 2, they released the Yakuza Remastered collection, which was a re-release of Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 for modern hardware, and also saw the restoration of the cut content in Yakuza 3. These games were not remade in the new Dragon engine, they were just remastered in higher resolutions and higher frame rates. After the Remastered collection, we saw the most recent release in the series called Yakuza 7, or in the West as it's known Yakuza Like a Dragon. It starred a new protagonist, Ichiban, and changed the brawler beat-em-up combat the series was known for to turn-based combat. Okay, so now that we've gone over all the releases, you can already probably tell why picking which game to start with is so complicated. So with all of that out of the way, let's go over the potential starting points and which ones will work and which ones won't. Number 1, starting with Yakuza, PS2, 2006. Naturally, the first place you might think to start is at the beginning, and I mean the very beginning, with the original Yakuza game on PS2. While I do think if you enjoy the series, going back to see where it started would be very fun, starting with the original game on PS2 won't work for obvious reasons. Most people probably don't still have a PS2 or PS3 with backwards compatibility, and both are getting rather expensive nowadays. Not to mention, there's updated versions of the original games on the latest hardware, so you can play everything in one spot instead of having to have multiple consoles. And most people will probably enjoy the updated games with modern features over the older games. Not to say the originals were bad, and from what I've seen, the remakes are surprisingly faithful to the original games. so you won't be missing out on anything anyways. Plus, the added in story, especially in Yakuza Kiwami, makes the story flow much better as there's more of a backstory for one of the main villains. Also, you won't have to deal with the cut content in Yakuza 3, and the Yakuza series on the PS3 experienced some pretty significant frame rate issues. Playing the remastered versions at 60 FPS or higher will lead to a significantly better experience. But like I said, if you end up loving the series, I'm sure it would be really fun to go back and play the first two games on the PlayStation 2 and see where the series began. Number 2, Yakuza 3 Remastered. Okay, so the next potential starting point could be Yakuza 3 Remastered. Wait, what you're saying? Why would anyone start with Yakuza 3? Well, the reason for that is that if you play all the games on the latest hardware, Yakuza 3 Remastered is actually the oldest game in terms of gameplay. While I think starting here would turn off the vast majority of people from the series, from a purely gameplay standpoint, you would see how the combat and general gameplay design has evolved over the years. That being said, while Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 all have their fans, and I personally think some aspects of those games are extremely well done, I'm thinking the taxi section in Yakuza 5, they are generally considered to be the low points in the franchise. You would also start in the middle of Kiryu's journey, so you simply would not get the same enjoyment out of his character development as you would from playing the previous games first. Unless you've already played Yakuza and Yakuza 2 on the PlayStation 2 back in the day, I really can't recommend starting here. Number 3, Yakuza Like a Dragon.
Turns out, all a hero needs is a quest. I finally found mine, and I'm going to play it my way.
Another potential starting spot is with the latest game, Yakuza Like a Dragon, and this is actually where I started off in the series myself. It's a great game, and it features a new protagonist along with a new cast of characters. That being said, there's a ton of callbacks to previous games, and some fairly major spoilers for Yakuza 6 and Like a Dragon's story, so while it's not a terrible spot to start, I wouldn't recommend it. If you have already played Like a Dragon and you're wondering where to go next, I would recommend Yakuza Kiwami, then playing through the series in the order it's meant to be played, which is Yakuza 1 through 5, then 0, then 6, and I'll be going over that reasoning next. Number 4, starting with Yakuza Kiwami. One of the best spots to start would be with Yakuza Kiwami. Since this is a remake of the first game, this is technically the actual starting point in the Yakuza series, even though Zero is a prequel to Yakuza Kiwami. If you start here, you'll experience the story in the order it was intended to be played, 1 through 5, then 0 followed by 6 and 7. While 0 is the earliest point in the timeline, like in 7, it features a ton of callbacks and even some minor spoilers will pop up in some of the side stories. You won't be able to appreciate everything in 0 because you were meant to have played the first 5 games first. So from a purely story standpoint, this in my opinion is the best place to start, especially if you've already played Like a Dragon or another game in the series and you already know it's a series you'll enjoy. However, that being said, if you haven't played any games yet, I actually wouldn't recommend starting here. While Yakuza Kiwami is a very good game, it is one of the shorter stories in the series and considered middle of the pack as far as Yakuza games go, as well as it being a bit light on content compared to other entries. Number 5, Yakuza Zero. If you have not played any games in the series and you want to know where to start, Yakuza Zero is the best place to begin. It's considered by many to be one of, if not the best game in the series, and features what I consider to be one of the best stories in gaming, period. Even though from a story standpoint you might not understand some of the references, I really don't think it will hurt your enjoyment of the game, as it really didn't hurt mine. Also, remember, Yakuza Kiwami is a remake of a 2006 PlayStation 2 game. A lot of things in gaming changed from that release and Zero's, and it really shows in the gameplay design. While again, Yakuza Kiwami is a good game, it seems like a lot of people might be turned off because of its somewhat outdated design in some areas. Playing Zero first will make you care about the characters and the world that Ryuga Gotoku Studio has created. This will make you genuinely care about what happens to them in the future and what twists and turns their narratives take. And when you do reach the plot points that are called back to in Zero and other games, you'll enjoy them all the same. Also, there's some recurring characters and storylines for the added and side content that does naturally progress from Yakuza 0 to Yakuza Kiwami 2 that will not be as enjoyable if you play Yakuza Kiwami first. For all of those reasons, Yakuza 0 is the best place to start playing the Yakuza franchise. However, wherever you do start, there will be some bumps in the road. There's almost no way to avoid going from newer to older engines, and it will be a bit jarring at times. For example, going from Yakuza Kiwami 2, which was developed in the new Dragon engine, to Yakuza 3 Remastered will feel awkward. While the combat was slowly developed from Yakuza 3 to Yakuza Kiwami, they redesigned it when they moved over to the Dragon engine. It's still a very similar combat style, but each style has its own feel. But no matter how you slice it, they are extremely fun games, and the Yakuza series has become one of my favorite gaming series of all time. I really hope more people try it out and give it a chance, and we will all get to see how it grows and evolves in the future. Also, don't be worried once you hit Yakuza Like a Dragon. It might be hard to believe it, but the switch from action brawler combat to turn-based is much smoother than it sounds. And Like a Dragon is one of the best JRPGs I've ever played, so we will presumably have more incredible games to play in the future. As far as spin-offs go, a lot of them never got localized outside of Japan, but there's a few to note. Judgment is the most recent one, and it just had a remaster released last week. I'm still playing through it, and I plan on doing a full review, but it definitely fits the Yakuza mold, so I imagine most people who like the Yakuza series will enjoy it. There's also Yakuza Dead Souls, which was a zombie spin-off of Yakuza 4. It doesn't have the best of reputations, but I just started playing it and I'm having fun. Although I would definitely save this one for last, and only look into it if you're desperate for more Yakuza content. I'm curious, if you have played through all the games, let me know what order you think people should play the games in, and which game is your favorite down in the comments below. If you're looking where to play the games listed in this video, all of the games are now on Game Pass for Xbox and PC players, excluding Yakuza Like a Dragon, and also all of the games are on Steam. For PS4 and 5 players, you can usually get the physical edition of Yakuza Remastered Collection cheap, and the other games in the series go on sale for cheap digitally fairly often. There's no Switch ports at time of writing, although I would love to see some of the Yakuza games get ported there so we can play them on the go. I'm planning on doing 2 more Yakuza videos, those being a Yakuza retrospective and also a ranking of all of the Yakuza games. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to see those as soon as they come out, and also hit the like button. Thanks so much for watching, I'll see you all in the next video.